So he stood before kings and gave America's case. Now he talks a bit more here about his frugality. We kept no idle servants. Our table was plain and simple, our furniture of the cheapest. For instance, my breakfast for a long time was bread and milk, no tea. And I eat out of a twopenny earthen porringer with a pewter spoon. Now he says no tea. What's the significance there? Well, tea had to be imported. You can get bread and milk just down the way here, but tea came in from overseas, over shipping. Now, anyone who doesn't know this, you might be surprised to learn that shipping was a state monopoly of the British government. To ship into or out of ports anywhere in the English Empire, your goods had to be on a British ship. So you paid duties to the British Navy to ship your stuff. So it was like UPS plus the Navy in one, plus a monopoly on top of that. So it's amazing the world prospered under those conditions, but in a sense they didn't prosper. They sort of starved until we found out about industry and free trade. And then it got serious. Then we really started prospering in the 1800s. But anyways, throughout the 16 and 1700s, this was the case. And tea was taxed. Tea, as you know, I'm sure, has got caffeine in it, which is, as you know, addictive. And so people want it. And tea literally drove the English crown. I don't think it was as high as 60 or 80% of the revenue, probably 10 or 20. You know, it's a significant bit of the revenue was taxes from tea. The Boston Tea Party was about tea taxes. So anyways, continuing. He says, however, mark this, notice how luxuries will enter families and make a progress in spite of principle. So he had these principles, and one morning he comes down to breakfast, and I found in a china bowl a silver spoon on the table. Not only was the bowl china rather than earthen, but the spoon is silver, for God's sakes. They had been bought for me without my knowledge by my wife, and had cost her the enormous sum of 23 shillings, for which she had no other excuse or apology to make but that she thought her husband deserved a silver spoon and china bowl as well as any of his neighbors did. If anyone deserves a good bowl and spoon, you do, Ben. This was the first appearance of plate and china in our house, which afterward, in the course of years, as our wealth increased, augmented gradually to several £100 in value. So just a couple of pounds for a bowl and spoon, or less than a pound for a bowl and spoon. I don't know how many shillings is in a pound, I really don't. And later on it's several £100 worth in the house. So his principles fell off. But for years, he said, he went on just bread and milk for breakfast, and earthen pewter spoon, earthen bowl. Now, he was a religious man, Ben was. But in a weird way, because as we've seen, Sunday was his day of study. And he talks a little bit here about why, and he gives an example of a couple preachers. And one preacher he got to know pretty well and attended Sunday dinner with him 5 weeks in a row, which was onerous and so forth. And he says, finally, I absented myself from public assemblies, Sunday being my study day. That was done early on in his life, and he never doubted the existence of the deity, that the deity had made the world and governed it by his providence, and that the most acceptable service of God was the doing of good to man. Now look at that. He believes in deism, and as we've seen before, he said what God forbids or allows, he would forbid or allow because it's good or bad. You know, it's not good or bad because God says, but it is good or bad there, and therefore God says we should or shouldn't do it. So God follows reality. God just comes and sees reality and reports to us what we should do. I think we can cut God out and just look at reality, but whatever. That's his view of what God is, and he says the best way to serve God was to do good to your fellow men. So actions like Stalinism would be out. So any socialist or utilitarian idea of harming one to help 1,000 would be out because that's harming. So you can't, it's doing good to man. That our souls are immortal, he believed, and that all crimes will be punished and virtue rewarded here or hereafter. These I esteemed the essentials of every religion, and being to be found in all the religions we have had in our country, I respected them all, though with different degrees of respect, as I found them more or less mixed with other articles. Now these other articles that were mixed in, besides these basic tenets of religion, these other articles that were mixed in served principally to divide us and make us unfriendly to one another. So he didn't care for that bit. The universal values of religion he liked. But he says he always is in favor of people speaking up in favor of God and so forth, and they can have their religion. He won't care to partake too much. And he says new places of worship were continually wanted in Philadelphia as it grew and grew. And they were generally erected by voluntary contribution. And he says, my might for such purposes, M-I-T-E, might, whatever the sect might be, was never refused. So he didn't discriminate against sects. He always contributed to religious undertakings to build churches and stuff. And now, is that a debit against his character? Or a credit? Or is it just we're just going to let him off the hook, or what? Now, I think it's fairly reasonable for someone before Darwinish to believe that God, there has to be a God to create the world. You look around you and you see order, there's got to be a God. You could take the deist approach, God started things moving and left us alone or whatever, but it's basically rational, because to fathom order and intricaciness like the human body and stuff coming from nowhere, I mean, it takes real scientific argument. Darwin. So anyways, I think that it's not necessarily against Ben's character that he believed in God, but I don't think he should have been contributing to building churches, because he said the particulars of any given church divided people, even if the universals of religion itself might in some way be beneficial, which I would also object to. Skipping down about a page, I had some years before composed a little liturgy or form of prayer for my own private use in 1728, entitled Articles of Belief and Acts of Religion. I returned to the use of this and went no more to the public assemblies. After a little interspice where he had the dinner 5 times with his preacher and stuff, and he went to a few things, he says he returned to using that. He was fed up with it again. He tried it again and went out. He says, my conduct might be blamable. Now, I give you credit, Ben. I'm not worried. My conduct might be blamable, but I leave it without attempting further to excuse it. My present purpose being to relate facts, not to make apologies for them. So, good guy, Ben is. Little too religious, even though he did stay home and study on Sundays. Shouldn't have been contributing to those churches. Now, I believe it was Ben who wanted the assembly to say a prayer before and after every day at the Constitutional Convention. I believe it was Ben. I believe he might have even led the prayer. He was very old at the time of the convention. Grandfather Ben, 80 years old or 70 or whatever it was. Let's see, 76. He'd be 71 years old. That's real old for a guy at the time. Oh, wait. 87, 82 years old. Wow, that's old for a guy at the time. It was about this time that I conceived the bold and arduous project of arriving at moral perfection. I wished to live without committing any fault at any time, and to conquer all that either nature, inclination, custom, or company might lead me into. As I knew, or thought I knew, what was wrong and right and wrong, I did not see why I should not always do the one and avoid the other. But I soon found that I had undertaken a task more difficult than I had imagined. So, from the reading that he had done, he outlined 13 virtues. Why 13? I mean, it seems that you could cut one out or add one more. Anyways, the names of the virtues with their percepts were. Now I'll just read the virtues themselves, and then we'll read the definitions of a couple of